Hi, I'm Bill, the Domestic Monk. Welcome back to another video, and thanks very much for watching. So if you've watched this channel at all, you know that my goal is to encourage Catholics to learn, love, and live their faith. And the main reason that I started doing interviews is to speak with people about different aspects of the Catholic faith, because the faith is so amazing and rich and diverse. And I want to encourage my fellow Catholics to learn about this faith. And there's so much to it, and it's just a shame if we don't immerse ourselves in it. And then, of course, one of the unique things of the Catholic faith is religious life. And we're all familiar with our parish priest, typically, but in many cases, that's all we're familiar with for a lot of Catholics, But we have a rich history in the church of the monastic life, and, going all the way back to the apostles and the desert fathers, down through today, and we have religious brothers and nuns in various capacities, and we have deacons, and then monks, and it's just there's so much to it. And so today I am excited to have with me Alexandra Buchlmayer. So I've known Alexandra and her family forever. I mean, her parents and my wife and I go back to, we started in the Sheriff's Department in Orange County together back in the 80s, and so we've been great friends, and I've had the good fortune of knowing them and knowing about Alexandra and her kind of journey here into the religious life. So I'm excited to have her on the show to talk about, just the process of discernment, what it is, how she felt called, and what that's meant in her life, particularly for those who don't know about people discerning what that's like, but also especially for those who might be considering a vocation to the religious life. So Alexandra, thanks very much for coming on and talking to us. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's start. Let's just give a little background on you. Like, who are you, and what was your faith journey like, and how did you start to discern that maybe the call to the religious life was for you?
Sure. Can I start from the very beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up in a primarily Catholic family back in Orange County, as you mentioned, in California. And my father is actually Lutheran, on his way to becoming Catholic right now. And I was baptized Lutheran, so I wasn't even technically Catholic when I was a child, but I was sent to Catholic school. And so primarily all my faith, all the lessons of my faith, everything that I learned of the faith was from my Catholic school education and not necessarily from home. But I remember my first Catholic school I went to from preschool through first grade. There was this statue of Jesus holding the two children outside, and all the time when we would walk past it to go to Carline, I would run up and jump on his lap and kiss him goodbye. My love for the Lord has started from when I was little. And I remember when my parents would go to Mass and we'd all go, which wasn't every Sunday, but we would go, and I would wish we could sit in the front, but we sat in the back because my sister's in a wheelchair, and it just worked out that way. On the weekends we wouldn't go, my grandma would take me, and I would drag her to the front row so I could watch what was going on. And I remember even from like age 3 or 4, I would look over to the choir, and I would tell myself from such a young age that one day I would sing in church choir. And since middle school through college, I have been able to. So that has been a beautiful blessing in my faith journey. But even as I got older, by the time in second grade, when it was time to take First Communion, I was told that I wasn't going to be allowed to because I wasn't technically Catholic. And I was very frustrated by this because I was Catholic. I was like, what are you talking about? And so we had to talk to my parish pastor, and he said, well, you can come back and say the Apostles' Creed to me because you've had a Catholic education this far. If you say the Apostles' Creed, then you can officially receive your First Communion, because that is a way of proclaiming the faith that you do believe. And so I came back, my grandma took me, and I remember that day very well because I was so nervous. I wanted to get it perfect. I thought it had to be memorized. So I get there and I'm like, it's not totally memorized. And he's like, don't worry. He's like, as long as you mean it, you can read it. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. So I did. And from that point on, I was truly Catholic. And that for me was a very special moment. I used to kind of begrudge the fact that I was baptized Lutheran. But now I look on it with such joy because it gave me that opportunity to choose my faith at such a young age and say, no, I want to be Catholic. I want to move forward with the sacraments. And around that time, when I was 8 or 9, I started writing down my prayers, and I would fold them up and put them in a little prayer box that I had in my room. The first time I did this, I actually believed that God would come down from heaven and take the prayers back up to heaven with him while I was sleeping. Something like a tooth fairy kind of thing or something.
Yeah.
You know? So that first morning when I woke up, I was disappointed that the papers were still there, the prayers. My mom was like, don't worry, like God knows your prayers. And I was like, okay. And so I continued to do that for quite a long time. And I recently went through them I found them all and on my prayer table and was reading through them. And just the innocence of those prayers from such a young age, but also the profundity of some of them. And I will touch on this later as I go deeper into my love for the community I'm about to enter. But I wrote the Lord thanking him for dying on the cross for us, even when I was like 8 or 9, and begging him to come down from heaven and come to my door so I could talk to him. And I was like, I love you more than anyone in the world. And if you can't come to my door at home because I'm at school, then please come to my school door just to talk to me.
Wow.
This is like such a real deep desire from such a young age that I wanted to see the Lord. I wanted to have that personal relationship with him. And my teachers at school noticed. And my 3rd grade teacher, she actually went on some conference and they were selling rosaries there. And she brought one back for me. Like a 3rd grade teacher to their, their student they don't have to do that. But she saw that rosary and it happened to be my favorite color, purple at the time. And she's like, I thought of you and I wanted you to have this rosary. And I still have it. And I think of her often when I see it. And my 4th grade teacher similarly bought this book of Saint Therese of Lisieux's Story of a Soul. Beautiful book, by the way, if you haven't read it. And told me, reminded her of Saint Therese, and she wanted me to have that book.
Wow.
And that has stuck with me forever. And I don't know that I'll ever know exactly what she saw in me at such a young age to say that. But it has continued to impact my faith life and remind me to strive for sanctity, no matter where I am in life.
That's
moving
awesome.
on. Moving on. When I got to middle school, this was around the time we moved from California to Wisconsin. And at that point, my faith life was a little rocky. It was my first time I'd ever gone to public school. And I was learning about world religions that I'd never learned before. And I was questioning, those big questions of, well, how do I know that my faith is the true faith? And I don't know that I ever, at the age, in 6th, 7th grade, ever researched it myself necessarily. But we moved again to a different city in Wisconsin, and I went back to Catholic school. And it was there that I started learning higher up religion class, middle school religion, and then eventually high school theology classes, and just learning more depth of our faith and why we believe what we believe. And it was again that I said, yes, like I definitely am Catholic and I definitely want to stay Catholic. And it was in that time in middle school, at the Catholic middle school, I switched to where I started altar serving and singing in the church choir, and eventually started lecturing as well. My transition into high school was beautiful because then I started taking real deeper theology classes and just loved it and wanted to continue altar serving and being a part of my parish at home. But I couldn't drive yet. And so I was relying on my parents to take me, and they didn't go every weekend. So I told my parents that the reason I wanted my driver's license so much my sophomore year of high school was so I could finally go to Mass every Sunday. And I did. I was so excited when I got my license. And I was going every Sunday my second semester of my sophomore year. And then starting that summer, I started going to daily Mass for the first time. I didn't even know we had daily Mass. Like, I didn't realize that was a thing, really. until around that time. And that was just the most like beautiful time for me. I continue to go to daily mass as much as possible.
Wow.
It's a
So you've
very
been going
big.
to daily mass since high school, really?
Yeah, yeah. So
Wow.
what that I mean, 3, 4, 5, yeah, like 5+ years. Well, 4, I guess. Yeah, 5 years. So, yeah, definitely something I hope to continue. And if I do stay in the monastery, like that will be a for sure thing.
Yeah.
I will be there. So, um, yeah, that's a little bit about my background faith life. Do you want?
Yeah, a couple of things. A couple of things here that I kind of stood out for me. So the great thing about the Catholic Church is, baptism for us is a sacrament, and we believe that if you're baptized using the right formula, which the Lutherans use,
Yes.
then you're actually a member of the Catholic Church. I mean, they may not
Yeah.
understand that or believe that. So that's
Yeah.
why it was so easy for you to come
To
over,
switch.
because you were
Yeah.
baptized and you had been going to Catholic school and you're receiving
Mhm.
the education for your first communion and everything. And yeah, that's
Yes.
interesting because I'd never heard, I've heard people go through our CIA and people with backgrounds, that came from other faiths who had, a lot of faith formation, that kind of stuff. So they were able to skip RCIA and come right in.
Yes.
But that's kind of what happened with you in your case.
Right. Pretty much. Yeah. It's such a young
Yeah.
age. So.
Then the other thing, I study the saints a lot. To me, the lives of the saints are amazing. But, you mentioned Teresa Lisieux. There are so many saints who, that's what I find so remarkable about somebody like you who finds their faith at a young age. I mean, I was such a, I was an altar boy and everything. I was a complete knucklehead. And I've told you this before, nobody ever in my life ever came up to me and said, "Hey, do you ever consider a call to the religious?" And I'm sure I was just projecting no piety at all, But as I read Lives of the Saints, I mean, of course, the ranks of the saints are filled with people from all kinds of walks of life, people who came to the faith late. But
Mhm.
there is a theme for people who really attain a high level of holiness, I think, who because the walk in for the walk in towards holiness is just like anything else in life, right? We have to invest in
Mhm.
it, and and so it takes time. And you don't become a pro basketball player overnight, or you know what I mean, or gain
Yeah.
any mastery of anything. And so it's such an advantage to have taken your faith seriously, because you open yourself up to that grace that knuckleheads like me, it was just bouncing off of me for a lot of my life. So that when I look at that now, and I look back at my own life, and I think, gosh, how much wasted time, how much wasted grace. But we all have a different journey,
Yes.
and we
Absolutely.
get what we get.
He uses it all.
Yeah, but you should feel blessed that you do,
Thank you.
that you have, you are wise enough at such a young age to cooperate with grace like that. It's really something. All right. Yeah. So you're starting. So now you're in high school, and you're starting to. You've had some people reach out to you and suggest to you that the religious
Mhm.
life might be for you. What happens there? You go from high school to college? Is that
Yeah.
where?
So, around that time, my sophomore year of high school, I was really, as I mentioned, getting into altar serving, going to mass weekly and daily. I had this beautiful priest at our parish who started to ask continuously if I'd ever discerned religious life, and I kind of naively kind of laughed and was like, "Oh, thank you, but no, thank you. That's not for me. I want to have a family." But my junior year of high school, now this was 2020, my junior year of high school, I was supposed to get confirmed. It ended up being pushed back till July that year, right before my senior year. But nonetheless, uh, as I was getting closer to it, I realized that getting confirmed was saying that I wanted to follow God's will for my life. Otherwise, why are you Catholic? Why are you staying in the faith if you don't want to follow God's will? And so I was like, okay, that is a conviction for me. That means I need to do something about it. And I have not been open to his will. I have very much my own will, my own desires, and that's what I've been striving for. So I stopped and I really started to pray about it and ask the Lord, where are you calling me? How can I best serve you? Where would you like me to go? And I got to the point where I could see myself both as a mom and as a sister.
Yeah.
It was this beautiful time, but also frustrating because I was like, okay, Lord, which one is it? Like, thank you for letting me see both, but which is it? And the more I reflected on it, the more I could see his movements, even in earlier times throughout my life. Some of those faith moments I touched on already, but even at some Catholic conferences in earlier periods of high school where they did altar calls, which is when a priest asks anyone who's discerning to come up and he gives a blessing over them. And I felt very compelled to go up at one point, and I didn't. I was like, why would I go up? I'm not discerning religious life. But I looked back on that in this period of 2020 and was like, oh, like that was kind of a stirring of the Holy Spirit. He was nudging me in that direction. And again, in November of 2019, I got this crucifix ring at NCYC, the National Catholic Youth Conference. And I bought it because it's our crucified Lord. And I said, kind of privately to myself, that I was dedicating my life to the Lord. At that time, I didn't even consider religious life as part of that promise. But I think the more I grew and the more I started discerning, I was like, I am giving myself to the Lord, and this is just another step towards that. But in August 12th of 2020, I went to adoration, and I knelt down before the Blessed Sacrament, and I was writing in my prayer journal, and I said, Lord, why do I feel this desire to be a sister? It shouldn't be because I think they're cool or I like their habits, but because I love you, and I want to love you and be with you and serve you for the rest of my life. And I knelt down before the Blessed Sacrament and looked at him, and I just said yes. And I was filled with this overwhelming sense of peace and joy, knowing that the Lord had called me to be his, that he proposed to me, and I accepted. And all the fears of what my family and friends would think about my discernment all fell away in that moment. And I knew that he would take care of everything. And I really put my trust in him. Yeah, such a beautiful moment.
That is incredible.
That was really the turning point for me in my discernment. Before, it had been, I was unsure. And then it
was kind of an abstract idea prior to that. You just, something that was out there, but now you've committed. So that's interesting. So, okay, so you have this experience. Is that when you get active now? Do you start taking steps toward finding out how did that work out?
Yeah. So after that, I was like, okay, well, I have to start looking at communities, I started doing tons of research at different religious communities, and I'd taken a 2-week summer course that year on St. Francis of Assisi and his life. And I love St. Francis. He has been very close to me in my discernment, and his willingness to suffer for the Lord, his desire to be a martyr, those two things really drew me to him. If you haven't heard of his Perfect Joy story, I won't share it now, but you should look it up. Very beautiful. And so I thought immediately, I was like, okay, I'm going to look at Franciscan communities. There's so many different types of communities. I was like, I'm going to be a Franciscan. So I started looking up different Franciscan communities, and I was looking kind of in the wrong direction. I was looking at what they could do for me, how my desires could line up with theirs. I wanted to still be a therapist. That psychology has been an interest for me for a long time. And so I was looking at different communities that would allow me to be a therapist. And so I narrowed it down, possibly too much in that regard, only looking at communities that would be open to that. And then I started reaching out, and I was invited to come visit a couple. And so I did. I visited a Franciscan community in Connecticut, and I loved it. It was beautiful. The sisters were great. But there was just something missing. And I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time, but I said, this isn't it. And it's kind of like when you go house shopping and you just walk into a house and you're like, this is not the house for me. You just know, you have this deep sense. And that's how it was. And so I left. And I think in between that time, I might have visited another community. But then I went to college, and October, I think October 20th of 2021, I stumbled upon the Passionist Nuns. Funny story, the way I found them was actually a friend I follow on Instagram. She posts on saints' feast days about the religious community they were from, if they were a religious. And St. Paul of the Cross is the founder of the Passionist Nuns. And so on his celebrated feast day in the U.S., the 20th, she posted about him and a little blurb about the Passionists. And I was just like, oh, they sound wonderful. So I looked them up and fell in love with them on their website. Their charism is to spread a greater devotion to and remembrance of the Passion of Christ. And they do this as a contemplative cloistered community, primarily through prayer and penance. They bring all the prayers that they receive as intercession to the foot of the cross. And they offer little sacrifices out of great love to console our Lord in his passion daily through different penances. And they call their monastery their own little Calvary, which was so beautiful. All of that really drew my heart to them. And I guess not I should say, however, they're cloistered.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to ask about that. So explain that for people who don't know. So there's kind of two types of religious. You could be a brother or a monk or a friar or a nun, right? But some of them work out in the world, right? They're teachers and nurses, and then others work in a cloistered community. What's the difference, and what made you decide this one was for you?
Yeah, so a lot of people have the misconception that back in, the 70s, 80s, when they said the nuns were teaching in the schools, those weren't actually nuns, those were sisters, because the difference is that all nuns are sisters, but not all sisters are nuns. So you address a nun as like, oh, Sister Mary or something, but they're not all sisters are nuns. So the way I describe it is a sister lives in a convent, a nun lives in a monastery, a sister is active, a nun is cloistered and contemplative. There are some active contemplative communities, but those are still those aren't cloistered, so they're sisters. The cloister, it's an enclosure. You take a vow, typically of enclosure, to stay at the monastery, not to leave. It's a pretty big ask, something that you really have to have a gift for, that like a true grace from the Lord to be able to be there. Someone I met with today actually described it beautifully. I don't know if you've heard of Father John Burns. He does a lot of talks and travels around the country with his Friends of the Bridegroom ministry on renewing religious life. Very wonderful man. Very wonderful priest. And he was telling me about a nun that he talked to, and she described it this way, that if you are called into the cloister walls are going to help shut out the world, give you permission to let go so that you can grow up into the Lord and really grow into that beautiful relationship. But if you are not called to the cloister, it's going to start feeling
like a prison.
Suffocating. Like a prison. Like you are going to be suffocated, and you are being forced to leave everything else. And so the grace there is that if you are called, you are going to flourish, because that's where he wants you. And he's going to give you that freedom of space to be in that one spot so that you can focus on this timeless relationship with our Lord. That's a little bit about the difference. Active sisters do have jobs. They live with their community typically, but they can go out and they have a job as teacher, nurse, whatever. And I was not looking at cloistered life at all. Like I mentioned, I wanted to be a therapist. So I had no desire for cloistered life. I had never even met sisters until high school. And so I didn't even really know much about the cloister. I thought that was kind of a medieval something that happened a long time ago thing, not something current that I would consider. But I loved the charism so much of the Passionists that I said I have to know more. I was really compelled by the Spirit to reach out to the sisters, the vocation directress, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I thought I was going to be Franciscan. Like, I had no consideration of cloistered life, but I need to know more. And another definition, I guess I should say, is a charism is like a mission, and an apostolate is the job of a community. So the charism is kind of that general idea, what they focus about, and then the apostolate is how they live that out. For us as a cloistered community, the apostolate is prayer, primarily. We have an apostolate of a retreat house as well, but that is all for the sake.
I can't wait to visit that.
Yes, please do. But yeah, that's for the sake of our charism, to draw people closer to our Lord in his passion. And what I think I kind of trailed off there.
Yeah, I got you off track there. You were talking about the difference between the charism and the apostolate, and that you didn't feel drawn. You never considered the cloister,
Yes.
But now you needed to learn more.
Yeah. Okay. So where I went from there, I was invited to come February of 2022 to visit on a retreat. And I was so nervous. I had never met real nuns before, and all I had heard, were scary stories from of old. Even though
you're going to get your fingers wrapped with a ruler.
Yeah, but not like that at all. And I got there, and I was welcomed with open arms. The vocation directors gave me a big hug, showed me to my room in the retreat house, and it was lovely. There was so much peace there. Every time I visited a community, I would make a pro and con list of what I liked and what I didn't like. And a lot of the time I had kind of an even plus or minus for me, at different communities, but I had multiple pages of pros, things that I loved about this community.
Wow.
And there was really only one that I didn't like, or like one con. And I just didn't like the fact that each room had a different type of carpet in it. Like, it was so stupid, like literally superficial, didn't matter at all. A very, aesthetic, I guess, problem to have. I was like, wow, if this is the only thing I don't like about this community, I was like, that should say something right there.
Wow.
The fact at that point, after visiting, the fact that they were cloistered wasn't even on my cons list, really. I had already come to be open to it by the time I visited. And there was this one moment, let me back up. There was this one moment in high school that we had a chapel at my high school. And during lunch one day, I was praying. And this beautiful image came to my mind as I was praying of me standing next to a sister by a tree around this kind of red brick building. And it was just this beautiful image, and I was like, oh, that's so nice, and kind of took it at face value and then didn't really think about it again. Speed up with like a year and a half to this visit in February of 22. I was in adoration at the monastery, and all of a sudden, that image came back to my mind. And then I thought, oh, this is a red brick building. Oh, I was like, I wonder. And I was looking around the pictures of the monastery, and there was a spot that looked significantly like the one in my mind. Wow. That I had seen before I'd ever heard of this community. And that was like, whoa, like, okay, God, we'll continue pursuing it here. Beautiful moment. And when I was leaving the monastery that time, each of the sisters gave us a hug goodbye. And one of them whispered in my ear, and she's like, I have a feeling this won't be the last time we see you. But I left scared. I had visited multiple communities, but I had never come back. And I was worried that I wouldn't come back, that this would just be a beautiful visit, and then I wouldn't end up making it back. And it was around that time I had also taken a child and adolescent development class at school. I'm in college at the time. And so after leaving the monastery, I was hit. I don't know if it's fair to say that it was spiritual warfare, but it was definitely a lot to consider. In my discernment was this desire again for children. And I was wrestling a lot with that the rest of that spring semester of 22. And I talked to my spiritual director, and he was like, well, you've never dated. he's like, if you continue to have this desire for children throughout the summer, maybe consider being open to dating in the fall as a part of your discernment in that direction. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's fair. I was a little nervous, but I was like, okay. Got to the fall. I still wanted children, and I was really confused. But there was a guy I kind of had a crush on. And I was like, okay, we'll see if this works. So we ended up dating. We only lasted 3 weeks. It was just very mutual. It was okay. We just kind of were like, no, this is not going to work. But there was this part of me too that just felt like I was cheating on the Lord by dating someone else. And I don't know if that's wrong to think that way, if that's really like desire or a thought, a conviction from the Lord in that regard, or if it's really just myself. But it was something that led me back towards religious life. And a sister too once pointed out, she said, when you imagine having children, is it you with a spouse by your side, or is it just children? Because the sacrament is of matrimony. It's not of children. Yes, you hope for children, but the sacrament itself is between man and wife. And so if you're going to discern that route, you want to discern it for the right reasons. And you're not guaranteed children. So I was like, wow, like that's a good thing to remember. And no, I never have anyone else by my side. I really only can see Christ as my spouse. And so it's like, okay, like that's another affirmation. And the sisters reached back out in November of 22 or before November of 22 and said they wanted me to come on a retreat in November. And I was so nervous. And I was like, I told my spiritual director, I was like, I don't know that I should even go. I was like, I'm not totally for sure 100% anymore that this is really where the Lord's calling me. And my spiritual director looked at me and he's like, you don't have to go with any ulterior motive of like finding out the answers. He's like, just go be with the Lord on this retreat. That's all you have to do. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And I was nervous. I was nervous that I would go and I wouldn't like it as much as the first time, that it was just a spiritual high, novelty high, my first time, because I'd never met nuns before. And this time it would just be like, oh, like, okay, but that was not true at all. I went and I loved it, I think even more than the first time, if that was possible. And it felt so much like home, like coming home. I felt so much peace there, so much joy. And I knew leaving that time that I would be back again, 100%. And I applied immediately to do a 10-day live-in, which is the next step. And I can go into more depth about this later, but the next step in the process of discernment would be to do a 10-day live-in, at least for a cloistered community like ours. And I applied and got accepted to do the 10-day live-in in the summer of 2023. Now I get to January of 2023, and I am still planning on going to grad school for psychology before I even just end up entering. And all of a sudden, that is starting to feel like not the best idea. I asked the Lord, I'm like, should I go to grad school? Like, do you want me to go to a master's instead of a doctorate? What is your will in this, Lord? And so I started learning more about different opportunities, master's programs, PhD, PsyD programs. And I decided to dedicate my Lent to asking the Lord that he would give me abundance of clarity during the 10-day live-in in the summer. So I spent my Lent praying for the summer. But the Lord decided to tell me over Lent instead of summer. And so by Monday of Holy Week, I had such a burning desire for the Passionists that I reached out to them and was like, can I please come for Triduum and Holy Week? Can I spend the Triduum and Easter, I should say, with you? And I got a response back that Tuesday of Holy Week. And the sister was like, sure. She's like, you can come. So she's like, why don't you come tomorrow? So I came Wednesday of Holy Week and stayed through Monday of Easter. And it was an incredibly profound experience with also some trials. Good Friday, is a huge day for the Passionists, right?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
Passion of our Lord,
Yeah.
but very somber. We spent noon to 3, the hours of Christ's death, in the chapel in silence, just dead silent.
Wow.
And for 3 hours, I will tell you, I may have gone to daily mass, but I've never sat in a chapel in silence for 3 hours.
I don't know if I could physically do that.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
But oddly, afterwards, I would do it again. Like, there was a joy in it. It was a challenge, but there was a joy in it. And there's a special devotion that they do at the middle of the night on Good Friday at midnight. They stay up for like an extra hour in the middle of the night to be with Our Lady of Sorrows, because Saturday she is mourning her son's death, waiting in hope for his resurrection. And so we sat there for an hour consoling Our Lady of Sorrows. We I think every sister does it a little differently, but I started going through Mary's entire life in the scriptures, and at every moment was just proclaiming to her that I'm there with you, that I want to be there with you and hold you and love you, as our Lord does. I mean, even something that's joyful of her own yes when Angel Gabriel appeared. I mean, that rocked her world. That is not
Yeah.
something she expected,
Yeah.
So even in that, it's like, Mary, you're not alone. And then, of course, getting to the part where he died, and being able to console her in that moment too, because Mary is still alive. She was assumed into heaven, and our Lord ascended into heaven. And so she has taken part in the eternity of our Lord, of him being outside of time. And so because they are outside of time, we can be there with them in that moment. But I'm going a little bit too much into the weeds here.
No, that's awesome, because what's great about that, and I don't know if you planned it, but that, like you said, that's what the Passionists are all about. I mentioned to you this before. There's a Passionist retreat house in Pasadena that I used to go to. They had silent retreats there. And I never did go during Holy Week. I can imagine what it's like, because they have a life-size quarter-mile Via Dolorosa, where they go through the whole Passion of Christ. In every retreat, we go through that. And then they have a Seven Sorrows garden.
Okay, yeah.
If you're telling me this, I can, because that is their, they weren't sisters there. It was a brother that led it and the priest, but, they are so passionate, about the passion of our Lord. It's something. So as you say that, it's kind of bringing things up in my memory. But for you, discerning this process, that's really it for them. Holy Week is really what they're all about, right?
It is. And that, and we take Holy Week and pretty much expand it to the entire year. And one of the sisters told me, she said, Holy Week is the most intense week of our year. If you could handle that and you want to come back after that, then you are golden. She's like,
wow.
You're good. She's like, that's the hardest time of the year in intensity, at least.
Is that what, so did this Easter week, celebrating it with them, is that what cemented it for you? Then you decided, this is for me?
Yes and no. I don't know if that was exactly the moment. I think there's a lot of little moments, but it did leave me wanting to come back for more. And it was in that moment that I did know that I wasn't going to grad school, that I was going to be entering after college. And that takes me then to that summer of 23 last year, when I'm on my 10-day live-in, and I loved it. It was so wonderful. And halfway through, the sister asked if I wanted to apply for aspirancy, which in a cloistered life is the first stage of religious formation. It can be 1 to 2 years, and it includes a 3-month live-in. And I was like, yes, I want to, but I want to wait until after I graduate so that I can have a year off of school before I enter religious life. And she's like, okay, you could do that. She's like, but you could also have a 2-year aspirancy and start now. And And I was like, oh, yes. So yes, please. So I filled out the request and waited very patiently, impatiently kind of, for them to respond with an answer. The chapter, which is a group of sisters in the community who have taken final vows, that vote on topics like this, moving forward in stages of formation. They had a meeting on Friday night of like second day before I left. And then I was in the kind of like craft room with some of the other sisters during our recreational hour. And my vocation director, Sister Cecilia Maria, walked in and she looks at me with this big smile on her face. And she's like, hey, like, I have some news for you. And I was like, yes. And she's like, you've been officially accepted into the aspirancy. And wow. I went nuts. It was such a joyous moment. It was really funny, too, because Sister Miriam Esther, one of the other sisters, jumped up and gave me a hug right away. And Sister Cecilia Maria is the one who's been my vocation directors for the past, like, year and a half. She looks at me and she's like, hey, I thought I would get the first hug. It was just this, like, really precious moment. And I was so excited. And then Mother Superior walks in a few minutes later and she's like, oh, here's some joy. And I was like, gosh, thank you so much. Wow. I gave her a big hug. And oh, it was so beautiful. So that Saturday morning, the 10th, June 10th of 23, I got welcomed officially into the aspirancy during morning prayer. The the day of the 9th that I got accepted, but officially started aspirancy Saturday the 10th, that morning. During morning prayer, right after the reading, Mother Superior went up and there was like kind of this mini ceremony. She announces that I've been accepted to the whole community, invites me up with the novice directress, and bestows this crucifix on me. And she said, welcome, these are your sisters. You have the same one. I love that.
Isn't that funny?
That's so funny. Oh, that's beautiful.
My buddy, he's a deacon. He made this for me.
Wow.
And that happened to be the cross that was on it. So
that's so cool.
It's my daily rosary that I use most. So that's fun.
It is also the cross the Passionists wear.
Wow.
Yeah, I at that point, Mother said, welcome, these are your sisters. And
wow.
It was so beautiful. And I think at that point on, I've kind of started considering myself as like a part of the community in that sense of being like, oh yeah, my sisters are doing this, or like, our community is doing this. Very much adopting that into my language. And it was very interesting. A couple things that I noticed after leaving the 10-day live-in. One, our world is very noisy.
Yeah.
A lot more silence in the monastery. And so coming out, even just going to regular mass and like talking to people, everything was louder. I was a little overstimulated coming out of the monastery, even though I was only there for 10 days.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Holy Lands. 2 days after, I went to the Holy Lands. Beautiful trip. But I was missing the monastery. It was this confusing moment for me because I was like, Lord, why? Like, I'm in the Holy Lands. Like, why do I just want to be back in the monastery? And he just so softly spoke to me and he was like, I have showed you your home. Now let me show you mine. And that was so beautiful. I was like, okay, Lord, like I'm here to see where my spouse grew up, that was beautiful from that point on. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been. I'm an aspirant. I'm due for my 3-month live-in, January 1st to March 20th this coming year.
Before we get to that, so now you're officially part of this community and you leave there. For people who, particularly for young people who are, are considering this, there's a lot going on in your life at this point now, right? Because you got to go to your parents. You're a young lady. Your whole life's in front of you. You're making this decision. It's not necessarily permanent because we'll talk about the process of vocation going forward, but that's a big step. How do you deal with that? I know your family situation and I know my own family situation. My wife wants nothing more than my kids to get married and have grandkids. Yeah. And so how do you process that? You touched on a little bit, but if you don't mind, how did you navigate that in your situation?
Yeah. So, if I may, the situation you're referring to is that I have an older sister who won't be able to have children, and I have a younger
Yeah.
brother. And so for my parents, I was going to be the one daughter that they could watch walk down the aisle, get married, have grandchildren for them. And I crushed their dreams, quite
Yeah.
literally. They, the first day back in 2020, when I told my mom I was discerning, my mom cried. And she was like, "You're not actually considering religious life, are you?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I am." Um, and she cried herself to sleep that night, she told me. And I kind of cried because they weren't excited for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my dad was very deflective. He made a lot of jokes about it, about me being a sister and how that would never actually happen. Um, it wasn't until my 10-day live-in, when I was leaving for that, that I realized how my dad really felt, because he was very deflective in that way. But my parents usually sleep in really late. But that morning at like 6:30, I was driving to Kentucky, and my dad called me, and I was like, "What is he doing awake at this early in the morning?" And I answer, and at first I thought he was laughing, and then I realized he's crying. He was bawling his
Wow.
eyes out and begging me to come back home. And he was telling me how much the sisters were taking away his daughter and that I was leaving him forever. And I tried to reassure him that right now this was just a 10-day live-in, that I would be back in 10 days, that I was not gone forever. It was going to be okay. And he's like, "Yeah, but then you're going to go, and then you're going to enter, and you will be gone forever." And I wanted to turn around so badly. But I knew that I wasn't going to stop following the Lord's will. And one day, if that does lead me to enter, then he has to learn how to cope with that without me there.
Yeah.
And so I just told him to go talk to mom and let her comfort him, and that I would be back. And since then, in this past year, they've both grown. They both, I think, are still hurt by it. But I've also grown in realizing that they have to grieve. That, like, in the beginning, I was very upset that they weren't happy for me, but I've come to realize that it is a loss. I was so in denial. I was like, it's not a loss. Like, this is great. But it is. Even I've come to start mourning that loss of leaving family behind and leaving the fact that I would never have children behind. And allowing myself to grieve that and allowing my family to grieve that, because that is hard. And that is a real factor in this. You do make sacrifices to follow the Lord. Leave everything behind, pick up your cross and follow me, and so I've let them mourn, and I've let them ask questions, and they have. And my mom, one of her ways of coping with it has to scavenge the entire website of our Passionist community to learn everything she can about them. There's this beautiful website called Parents of Vocations, or Parents for Vocation. I think it's Parents of Vocations. And it's kind of a support website for parents who are struggling with the loss of their child entering religious life. And so my mom has spent some time on there. My dad, to make jokes that the cloister is like prison and a cult, which I don't totally know that is truly a joke for him. I think he partially does believe it. But they had the opportunity this summer to meet my sisters for the very first time. Excited. They were not excited, but they did it. And I was really proud of them and grateful that they did come to meet them. And they loved the sisters. They thought they were very nice. My mom said something to me that meant more than anything she said during my discernment. She said that she can see why I love it there. And that understanding, that little bit of understanding, meant the world to me. And that night when I was sleeping in the monastery and my parents were there, it was this really cool experience of going to sleep, resting in the knowledge that everyone I love, all my family, is in one place. My family, and my sister family and God.
Wow.
Everyone was all there. And that was such a peaceful night of sleep. But also, I knew it was a very rare moment because that might be the only time they get to spend a night at the monastery in our retreat house. So I took that very appreciatively. But so now they're getting there. My mom's is more like, okay, yes, go on the 3 months, but hopefully you won't like it and you'll come back.
Yeah.
For you, and if that were the Lord's will, then praise the Lord, that be done. But if that's not the Lord's will, then that's not going to happen, and I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that goes as it approaches.
Hey, thanks very much for sharing that. I know that's a difficult thing, but it is, these are serious choices we're making, But I know as a parent, like, I would like nothing more than for one of my children to go into the religious life. I mean, it's just such a gift. And I know, I'm not in the same situation, in the situation with Lindsay that your parents have been dealing with for 30 years. That's, but look at the grace that's brought into your lives too, right? And that's what I say. You can't, like, if you give your child to God, or if you allow your child to give herself to God, and you do it, joyfully, you can't outgive God, right? Yeah. And so that's the thing. I mean, because really, we all came up in a law enforcement career, and that, look at that career. It's a sea of divorce and, alcohol problems and just a mess. And you're not always, what do we want for our children, really? We want them to be happy, and the best way we know that as Catholics to be happy is to live the life that God wants you to live. Exactly. And even though it's hard for us as parents because we want to control, at some point you have to let go anyway, because you're not going to be able to control your children's lives.
Well, and that's so true. Especially, I mean, once you're 18, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But even scripturally, like, we are called to honor our mother and father, but we are also called to follow the Lord. And when those two things conflict, you can still honor your parents even if you're not obeying their desire to stay where they want you. Even in marriage, the woman, the spouse, the man and woman leave their families to become one.
Right.
And that's really what I'm doing. I am leaving my family to become one with the Lord, to go and marry him as my spouse.
All right, let's talk about the process. So you've got, I mean, that's another interesting thing about religious life. Some of these other faith traditions, you can become a minister, or you can become, a preacher or whatever with very little training. Yeah. That's not the truth. That's not the way it is in the Catholic Church. Now you're going into this community. What's the process look like for you? It's a multi-year process, multi-step process, right?
Yes, absolutely. The one distinction in in the formation of sisters between nuns and sisters is that the nuns, the cloistered communities, have an active, an extra portion called aspirancy, which I'm in now, and that's 1 to 2 years with a 3-month live-in. So we know that part already. Then we have postulancy. At every stage of formation, you have to reapply and express your desire to move on to the next stage, which I would do probably this coming March, at the end of my 3-month live-in. Before you can enter a religious community, and I think most religious communities and seminaries, you have to take a psychological evaluation to make sure that you don't have schizophrenia, personality disorder, like some psychotic disorder. Make sure you're stable enough to handle that life, because it is very rigorous, very structured. And
it's a small community. You're going to be living with a small number of people for the rest of your life. It's that's why the scrutiny is so great, because it's difficult. It's a family, like you say. Families are dynamics. The family dynamics can be challenging.
Yes, and you can't just go, take a break somewhere to get away from them. You are with them at all times. So Yeah. Once you get accepted after that, and that clears, then you start postulancy, which is a year. At the end of postulancy, you receive your habit and your sister name. So it's your vestiture day. And at that
Now,
point,
do you get to pick your sister name, or is it assigned to you?
community is a little different. For ours, we suggest 3 names, and Mother Superior goes on retreat and prays about it, and ultimately decides.
Wow.
I heard
I
it.
got to tell you a quick
Yeah,
story. I got a
please.
good friend of mine. His name's Pat. In fact, my first interview I did on my program was with him. He was an Alexian brother back in the 60s, and
Wow.
he's become an expert on the Alexians and on the Grisham Monastery where he did his year up there. But it was funny. They did the same thing. They submitted 3 names, and he didn't get any of the names, and they called him Brother Gordon. And he's like, Gordon, and he just never accepted the name. And it turned out he discerned out, and
Okay.
sort of, but I still call him Brother Gordon to this day.
Funny.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. So yeah, you guys pick your names, and then what happens?
Yeah, so then we start our novitiate, which is 2 years. You become a novice. And that is really that period of time for deeper discernment within the direct charism of the community. You learn the community's history, their charism, their mission, their focus, and pretty much everything that you can about them, their rules, their constitutions. And then, assuming you want to move forward, you take first vows. These are temporary vows. You take that at the end of your 2-year novitiate. And
So now you're 3 years in at that point.
yes, yes,
So you're 3 years, okay, and then
yes.
you
And
take your temporary vows at 3 years.
yes, and those temporary
Wow.
vows, all communities, all religious communities take the 3 main vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. However, some communities, like typical cloistered communities, we take a fourth of enclosure, a vow of enclosure, and then our community takes a fifth vow to devote to promote the devotion of and remembrance of the Passion of Christ.
Wow.
And so we take those 5, and then you begin your juniorate. Not every community calls it this, but it's kind of that just in between period between temporary vows and final vows. Every community is also a little different in the time length. Ours is 5 to 6 years living within your temporary vows. And
Wow.
you renew them, I think, every 2 years. So probably like twice, maybe 3 times before you take final vows. But then you get to final vows. So this is already, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 9 years in before final vows. And so then final vows is this beautiful ceremony. It is your wedding day. It really is. It's your wedding day with the Lord. And for the Passionists, we carry in a cross and wear the crown of thorns as we approach the altar when we process in. And then during the ceremony, we lay on a pall. A pall is something they put over, caskets in a funeral when someone has passed, and we get covered with one, black pall, while a litany of saints is singing, representing the death to ourself, and when we rise, the rising of new life in the Lord. And then we kiss our family, kind of goodbye. I mean, we will see them again, but
Yeah.
it is this ceremonial kind of goodbye of my old self. And then we recite our vows and our dedication to the community, and we receive our ring. And at that point, you're a sister for life.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's it. That's it's like marriage. You're not supposed to divorce. You can't
Yeah.
leave the community at that point. If you do, if for some reason you need to, which would pretty much be like some kind of mental breakdown, like some severe reason you would need to leave, you'd have to get permission
Yeah.
from the Vatican to do so. So, um,
Wow. That's serious.
it's
Yeah.
serious.
It's like a priest. Once you've
Yes,
been ordained a priest, you're a priest for life,
exactly,
right?
exactly. Yep.
Yep. Wow. That's exciting. I mean, the whole process is exciting. It's something that very few people get, and that's why I love to go to retreats. You get to see that, you get to experience kind of the religious life, and I'm looking forward to going up there to the Passionist Nuns at St. Joseph's, and because you can participate, you can go into the mass and
yes, and the liturgy of the hours.
Yeah, I strongly encourage anybody who hasn't taken the opportunity to do that to go on a retreat, because and it doesn't matter which community, but you start to learn a little bit about what the religious life is. So really, your life going forward is going to be a life of prayer. So that's what I want to ask you about. A lot of us, we just struggle with prayer. I mean, prayer it's hard, right?
Yeah.
And there have been, St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila, and there are so many people who write about the trials and growing and advancing in the spiritual life through prayer. And, is that something that concerns you, that, that's going to be the main work of your life? Does it intimidate you at all? I know it would me, or is it something that you feel like you're called to do?
I do. In the short, yes, I do feel called to do that. I spent a lot of time during World Youth Day last year contemplating this, praying about this in regards to St. Therese of Lisieux, cloistered, and Mother Teresa, a missionary. Teresa, what a lot of people don't know is she started out as a cloistered sister. Therese, even though she stayed cloistered, she's the patron of missionaries. She loved the missionaries. She had a great desire for missionary work, but she remained cloistered. And so I've asked the Lord a lot about this question, is that I have a great desire for mental health, like psychology work, therapy work, and helping others in that regard. And I've had to lay that down at the foot of the cross. And I've come to this crossroads of, which heart am I? Or, which heart have you given me, Lord? Is it one where I am meant to go out and serve the people directly, or one where I'm meant to serve them through prayer? Because I wrote this big paper on this once in college about prayer being the heart of the church. The contemplative life is not a selfish life, is not one that is meant only for the sister and the Lord. But it is this bringing up of all people to the Lord, lifting up of all people to the Lord. And I have continually felt this desire toward that life of prayer, that I can do more good for the people of this world by lifting them up in prayer. And so, yes.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Prayer can be scary. I mean, imagining doing it all the time can be scary.
Yeah. But
it can also be so beautiful, because what is prayer? Prayer is a conversation between you and the Lord. And
boy, does the world need prayer right now.
Yeah.
The world needs prayer. I mean, every generation does. We tend to think that the generation we're in is unique. Yeah. But, you look at the history of the church.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we've had prayer warriors all the way through. Who would we be right now, right?
Yes.
Right?
Oh. Yep.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you have a patron saint?
So my I guess my official patron would be my confirmation saint, which is Saint Joan of Arc.
Wow.
Not many people know that I actually wanted to go to the military in high school. I was training a lot for that leading up to my confirmation. So I chose Saint Joan of Arc as the leader of the soldiers for Christ. I love her and her story and her strength. And I wrestled with, after I discerned not to pursue the military life, because I had started discerning religious life, I was kind of frustrated. I was like, well, I chose Joan of Arc as my saint. Like, how does she connect with me now? But realizing that I might not be serving the U.S. as a soldier or anything, but her strength is something that I desire, and she can intercede for me in that regard, to give me strength to pursue spiritual warfare and the battle that is evil in the world, and that why we pray is to bring people to the Lord. And so asking her for strength in that. But other saints that I have a great devotion to, a love for, is Saint Monica. Saint Monica is Saint Augustine's mother, and she interceded for him. She begged the Lord for his conversion every single day. until he, I mean, I bet even after he converted, Lord, thank
Yeah.
you, like keep him strong in the faith. I ask for her intercession for my father and for my brother all the time.
Yeah.
And I have a
That's
deep
funny.
love
I
for him.
prayed to Saint Augustine for your father.
Yeah,
So
wonderful. Praise the Lord.
yeah.
We got them both. We got them both for him. But actually, if I could pick a sister name, it would be Sister Monica Marie of the Foot of the Cross.
Wow, that'd be great.
I would
Those are
love
some
to have
powerful names.
Monica is so special, especially as somebody entering a cloister. Monica, I mean, prayer is the main thing, right?
Yes.
In the
Yeah.
cloister, and so intercessory prayer is what most of that is. And so she, as an intercessor, is somebody who's very special to me. And I ask for her intercession a lot, and for her to give me that strength as an intercessor. But then I love Saint Therese of Lisieux,
Yeah.
and Saint Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross. All three of them are very contemplative, and I love their poetry. I'm a big poet. I love writing poetry, and I love reading poetry. And they have captured my heart in their ability to express their mysticism and their life of love with the Lord through that mode of prayer. Yeah. So and
That's fantastic.
And Francis of Assisi. I guess those are all my big favorites.
That's the thing about Catholicism, especially when you learn about your faith.
Yeah.
There are so many to choose, and it just keeps growing, right? Exactly. So, do you have any? Do you have a favorite devotion?
That's such a good question. Honestly, sometimes I feel like a bad Catholic. I don't do, all the big different devotions all the time. But one that I continue to be drawn towards is praying for the souls of purgatory.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Saint Therese said this. She's a zeal for souls. Like this is her mission, to bring souls to heaven. And I very much have assumed that mission. And so very often I struggle with a lot of health issues, a lot of physical muscle pain, muscle weakness, and fatigue, etc. And a lot of the time when I'm in the midst of struggling with that, I stop and I say, okay, Lord, this is very frustrating. This is very hard. I wish it would go away. But if it doesn't, if this is your will, I ask for this to be used for the souls in purgatory.
Wow, that's great. That's a great example of how you can offer up suffering, because it's such a difficult concept for people.
Yes,
right?
It is.
Yeah, and, great.
And knowing too that all suffering is evil. The Lord doesn't purposely desire you to suffer, but he allows it. And that's the difference between his permissive will and his absolute will. He allows suffering, as his own son suffered. A lot of people think they're above suffering, but it's like our own God suffered for us. And so we can suffer. We're going to suffer. That doesn't mean you have to seek it out, go purposely hurt yourself more in the sake for the Lord. But take on the suffering that you have been given and allowed by the Lord, and use it for good. Because it can be just pain. It can just be pain. Or it can be redemptive suffering. And you can turn it into that by asking the Lord to use it. And he does use it, and he will use it. So I have a great love for the souls in purgatory. I want to be able to get to heaven one day and see all the souls up there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, it does sound like you've got you're picking the right community, because that's what the focus of the Passions is. It's on the Passion of Christ. I mean, we have, Divine Mercy and all these other, but your focus and your attention to your community is going to be on that. So
the Lord has tied this thread along throughout my whole life, bringing me here.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. That's how I feel. It's like, I've been Catholic my whole life. I've been up and down with the faith, and I've never had. You hear about people like you've had that vision at one point. I know people that have had locutions or what they believe to be encounters with the Holy Spirit. I've never had one of those things in my life, but I can look back, like you said, and I can see. I never see it in the moment. no one ever speaks to me audibly, but I can look back and see where those moments of grace have been working in my life, And so, hey, so what advice would you give? I mean, you've been through a lot here and you're getting ready to formally enter into the religious life. What advice would you give for somebody who's going through that process that you went through ever since you were in junior high? What would be the best piece of advice, you think?
Something I tell pretty much everyone is right off the bat, if you don't have a spiritual director, get a spiritual director. A lot of people are like, okay, what does that mean? How do I do that? It can be pretty much anyone in the Catholic faith that you look up to, that you believe has a strong faith life, that is wise in the faith, that will be able to guide you. I prefer to pick a priest so that he can be both my primary confessor and my spiritual director, because then he knows what I bring to the table when I'm confessing.
What your struggles are too.
Yes. And so that's one thing. Get a spiritual director. Two, a lot of people, including myself in the beginning, for quite a long time, go at discerning in kind of the wrong way. I mentioned that I was really focused on finding a community that would let me do what I wanted to do as a therapist. But discernment is not about what you do. You could be doing anything. It's about your relationship with the Lord. So in the beginning of discernment and throughout it all, your first question is, Lord, how do you will me to love? Where you call me is my relationship of marriage between you and myself, or is it between you and myself through someone else in the sacrament of marriage? And so just building that love relationship with the Lord, no matter, even if you're called to married life, that is beautiful and sacred and holy. But have a love relationship with the Lord, because that's how you're going to hear his call to whatever vocation you're called to. You want to have that relationship with him, and he wants that relationship with you, no matter what kind of past you've had. He loves you, and he will always forgive you. And believe me, I've had to go many times seeking mercy and love and forgiveness from the Lord. And he always draws you back. No matter how far you strayed from one time or another, he wants you. And so that's the best advice I could give is seek him out and ask him where he wills for you to go, and he will guide you. Really, the community you pick is what he has given you as the house that he wants to live with you in. And so he will guide you in that way. And their charism, their mission, is more important than what they do, how they live that out. Look at the mission. And that's going to fit. Father John Burns, again, I had a meeting with him today, so I'm pulling out these great things he said. He told me that, at baptism, you're given your charism. Like you receive your charism from baptism, and the Lord knows where he wants you. He knows you before he formed you in your mother's womb. And so if that's, to hold that true, to realize that, okay, that just means that I have to find that in myself, where the Lord is calling me, what charism do I hold, and let him and lead you to how you're going to express that in your life.
That sounds like great advice. It's a lot better advice than I can give. I'll tell you that. You're wise for your years, that's for sure. Alexandra, thank you very much for the time you've taken today. I really appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck going forward. We're going to be praying for you, as I know you're going to be praying for us.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do one little plug. Can I?
Of course.
This is both for current people who are discerning, but also for discerners themselves. You can't enter religious life with any debt, and a lot of people don't know that. And I'll keep this short, but I want people to know that if you're discerning, because a lot of people are afraid because they go to college and they're like, oh no, I have debt, I can't enter religious life. There are programs, and one in particular, the Labouré Society, that will help you learn how to fundraise and support vocations, so that you that's mine. So Yeah, so you can be able to enter. So I am finishing up with the Labre Society this December before I enter. I will have successfully fundraised what I need with my debts to be able to enter.
That's awesome.
But they do that in such a beautiful, free way of allowing whatever money you raise is not just to you, but to your whole class. And that if you discern out of your community, you have that free discernment. And the money that would have gone to you goes to others' vocations. So money is never lost in this. It is never used only by the person who it's being raised for. So it's a protection for both the aspirant and the benefactor. But I just wanted to put that plug out there because I think a lot of people that does scare them away from discernment is that they have too much debt. I've heard too many stories of people who are older now who never entered, even though they felt called, because they had debt. And so
I'll make sure to put a link to that.
Yeah,
I'll make sure to put a link to that so people can follow it. And also I'd say, that's the important thing too, is so many people, so many times in the faith, people will do that. Well, an obstacle will come up or something they think is an obstacle. And rather than go talk to a vocations director or somebody, they allow that to derail them.
Yes.
And, so many people that I talk to who are, a raised Catholic and have kind of fallen away and they haven't come back to the church because of some misconception or, and they just haven't gone to the church and asked somebody who's in the know.
Yes,
so exactly. like you're saying, the answers are there.
Mm-hmm. And there's hope.
You just need to come to the church. It's been around for 2,000 years. There's somebody who knows the answer. You just need to ask.
Yes. So with that,
awesome.
It's been wonderful speaking with you, Bill.
You too, Alexandra. Thanks very much for your time. And thanks everybody for watching. And as always, siempre adelante.